hi to our neighbors and friends who can't be here in person. Welcome to the Money Smart for Small Business series. This is taught by our friends at First National Rio Grande, and this is Heather Johnson. She's a Vice President of, what's your title there?
Assistant Vice President, Commercial Banker.
Commercial Banker. So, hi, welcome. Take a seat and join us. These classes can only be taught by financial institutions, so that's why we partner with First National Rio Grande, and we really appreciate the fact that they teach these for us. The topics are great. We hold them monthly, and today's topic is called Organization Types, Pros and Cons of Business Structures. If you've missed any, this is our this is our 5th class, and there's 13 total. We started in November of last year. We'll have one a month every month in 2017. If you've missed any of the classes that you want to go back and revisit, you can visit FatPipe ABQ's YouTube channel and take a look at those. And we can also give you access to all the curriculum online through First National Rio Grande's website. So thank you for coming. We really like that people come in person. And the benefit to you guys here in person is that you get to ask questions specific to your company of the experts. So it's really great. And then you get to participate in the conversation. So we appreciate you coming. Heather, take it over.
Okay. Before I get started, I'm also going to advertise tomorrow is the kickoff for Money Smart Week, which is actually a whole program put on through the FDIC. And tomorrow at West, the Women's Economic Self-Sufficiency Center on Broadway in Lomas, from 9 to 4, we're going to be doing various classes. So from 11:30 to 1, I'm going to be teaching a class on personal financial literacy. It talks a lot about budgeting and spending habits. From 12 to 1:30, they're going to be doing a class about break-even analysis, which will be taught by the wonderful folks at West. And then also in the morning at 9:30 is a senior financial literacy class. So those will be happening. And then if you go to the website for Money Smart Week, you can find other classes happening around Albuquerque of various different topics. But we'll get started with today's class of organizational types and things to think about when you're setting or starting your small business. So the first thing, and somebody already discovered it, is there's a test. So maybe not quite all the way down, Lisa. Maybe one up. If you guys want to flip to page 4 and 5 of your participant guide, there's a pretest to sort of see where you're at and what you know.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Do you want to move over closer, or? I don't know. Okay.
It's a hard test. Oh, it's very quiet. We're taking a test.
Yeah.
The test is on page 4 and 5. I know you don't want to miss it.
That's right. I think we have time for 15 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to go. I'll give just another minute. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about 5 different types of business. We're not going to be covering not-for-profit. We're going to be covering sole proprietorship, partnerships, limited liability companies, C-Corps, and S-Corps. So I'd like to take a moment and have everybody introduce themselves and talk a little bit about which type you've been thinking about and perhaps maybe one reason why you had selected that one for your business. So if you want to go first, since you.
Sure. My name is Roman Sandoval. This is my partner, Lee Garcia. We're not picking one of these per se. We have a financial practice through New York Life, so the reason why we took these courses is to learn a little bit more about our clients and just to help them out, because a lot of them are business owners, and just make sure if they don't know an answer, we could help them with it.
Good. You want to go ahead?
My name is Marikish. I was told I should have an LLC, so I better find out what there is out there.
Great.
I've been operating for myself in the conflict resolution field, and I'm a part-time instructor at university.
And I'm Elaine Speck. I'm currently a certified nurse practitioner, and I work for the university. In past roles, my husband and I own the C-Corporation for Healthcare Consulting, and I'm now interested in retailing as well as consulting for a skin and beauty company. I with my friend Nikki, and I always enjoyed the additional buffer that I have from my personal life by having a corporate or a different business entity, whether it's a flow through like an LLC or sole P, different from a sole P. The C corporation was nice, but it's a lot of work. And so I'm going to try to simplify that.
My name is Nikki, and I work as a sole proprietor right now on skincare, and I'm looking as my business continues to build to possibly create a little bit more separation and have some tax benefits to moving to a different model. So.
Okay.
My name is Melba, and I have a rental housing company. I am an LLC at the moment, mainly because my accountant was recommended it, because it has limited liability up
Mm-hmm.
My name is Brian Henderson. I'm a software and embedded systems engineer, and I've been consulting and doing independent work for about 9 months, and I'm still a sole prop and trying to understand if I need to change that for various reasons. So I'm here to learn it.
Okay, great.
My name is Michael. I've been operating as an LLC for about 8 years. I'm also a software engineer. I work in the field of bioinformatics, so I work with geneticists to make sense of their data. The reason I'm an LLC is because of the liability, but I'm here today because I want to learn how I can sort of merge 2 different types of businesses. So right now with the software engineering consulting thing, I'm getting paid by companies, but now I'm also working with people who have grants and have government funding, and so I also do a lot of training. And so I'd like to know if there's sort of a hybrid of something that can allow my business to grow larger than just me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd like to know if there are any, what are the constraints of just being an LLC and working in those two totally different funding sources?
Okay.
My name is Kimberly. I would probably choose a sole proprietorship right now because I'm so tiny. But for years I've wanted to become a different entity and use the LLC for the veil of protection. But I recently have heard or read somewhere that that veil is being poked by the IRS more now. And so the whole idea behind the LLC is changing. So I was hoping maybe I'd get more new information on that.
Okay. Well, we'll touch on that a little bit today.
I'm Andrew Sells. I'm a patent agent, and I'm an LLC. And ultimately, I'm more interested, I know it's beyond the scope of this, but getting into the details of the taxation tax advantages.
Mm-hmm. We're going to touch on it briefly. I don't know if we'll go into as much depth as you want, but it is part of a big piece of what we're talking about today. So,
Hi, I'm Jamie Wells, and I have a small consulting firm, J. Wells and Associates, LLC, and S-Corp, S Corporation. I help organizations set up quality management systems and improve their operations and processes.
I'm Misty. I work with Lisa here at Bioscience and FatPipe, and then I also have an LLC accounting and bookkeeping for myself.
And I'm sorry, what kind of business are you in? What do you do?
Me?
Yeah.
Me or Misty? I marry people. I'm a minister.
Oh,
A marrying minister.
I divorced them.
Been there, done that. I lived in the divorce capital of the world and did 8 divorces a day, so.
wow.
Yeah, I'm a mediator, so
Oh, I'm on the loving end now.
I am for the
That's
love
nice.
too.
So there are about 5 main considerations when you're thinking about which organizational type you want to do. And we have moved on. We're on page 7 still. Taxation. Somebody brought that up. That's one of the biggest reasons for choosing. Taxes on profits are paid through either your personal tax return or on a separate tax return for corporations. And there's different tax brackets for each depending on your personal situation. Liability and risk. Are you going to be personally responsible if something happens to your company? Is your personal home and assets going to be on the line versus just having the company's assets on the line? Management. Who gets to make the decisions? Continuity and transferability. Thinking long term. Is this something that when I'm done, I'm going to be selling to somebody else, and what would that look like? Or am I just going to shut it up and close the doors and call it a day? And expense and formality. Each one of these has different costs in getting it set up. I heard somebody say a C-Corp is pretty complicated versus a sole proprietorship where you kind of just start filing licensing fees and get going. So those are things to take into consideration too. So on each, your personal organization, these factors will have a different impact as to what it is you're trying to set up. So on a sole proprietorship, which we are on page 8, the owner has unlimited personal liability. The taxes go through your tax return, either through your Schedule C or Schedule E, depending on how you file. And so it'll be just included as your tax bracket as money. The best part is you control the business. So if you're somebody who wants to have all the control, a sole proprietorship is good for you. It's the simplest to set up, the least expensive, lowest cost to form, and appropriate for maybe a small startup or somebody getting started. I have always been taught as a banker that a sole proprietorship takes on the most liability, and it does. And through this program, and I believe they say it, that there are ways to mitigate the risk of the personal liability through setting up contracts and through insurance. And so if that's something that you want to maintain a sole proprietorship but want to mitigate some of that risk, you would want to talk to your insurance agent about different policies you can get to cover that. Of course, then you're also talking to a lawyer about how to set up contracts so that your personal risk is mitigated. So then you're getting into more cost and more complexity than what you were probably thinking of as a sole proprietor. So then is that really maybe the right decision or route to go? But there are ways to sort of mitigate that personal responsibility. But as a sole proprietor, if somebody slips and falls at your house, then your house is on the line, depending on how you have things set up. Does anybody have questions about a sole proprietorship? Obviously, it has to only be one person. So you and your buddy can't decide to become a sole proprietorship and own 50-50. If there's going to be more than one person involved in any sort of ownership, this isn't what you can do. So if you and your buddy want to get together, now you're looking at a general partnership. So again, on a general partnership, you still have that personal liability. And in some ways, this is kind of worse because now you also have the reliability of your partner. So let's say your partner, somebody has an accident at your partner's house. Your partner's house is liable, your house is liable, and even though you weren't involved, you're out there. Again, there's ways to mitigate this through insurance, through contracts, and how you set things up. But it's good to understand that you need to set those up to begin with. And again, then maybe you should be looking at a different sort of company before getting into a general partnership. Pass-through taxation. It's the same sort of thing where all the taxes report on your personal income tax return. So you and your partner will file and you'll decide who owns how much of the business. And if it's 50-50, then you report 50% of the income on yours and your partner reports 50% on theirs. If you decide to do it 70-30, then that's just 70% on yours, 30% on theirs. You share in all the risks, like I mentioned, and all the costs. It's very simple to form, and it's very low cost. And depending on what sort of business you're selling or what kind of liability, it can still be a good situation for you. Like I'm trying to think as a marriage, somebody who marries people, it's not like contracting where you're going out and you have huge liability costs. So you don't have the same type of liability situation as some other companies do.
Yeah, no one's coming to the property where I stay. They call and say, will you marry us? And I meet them where they want to meet.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I can't see down their future. I don't know what a couple could hold me responsible for. And the background is legal secretarial, so I want my 6 totally covered.
Right.
Yeah.
But as a nurse, you probably have more liability situations that you wouldn't want to perhaps go the sole proprietor or general partnership because the liability is much greater.
Well, and so for an example, in wanting to become a consultant with my friend's company,
Mm-hmm.
and I asked her about that. I said, because I am a nurse and nurse practitioner, am I held to a higher standard if somebody doesn't like the product or they have an outbreak? Will they say, you know, am I more exposed than somebody who is not a medical person? So when I started answering this question, I said, well, you know, maybe when I start consulting, I'll really want to consult as a business entity as opposed to an individual person.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and as a sole P and have that liability.
Right.
So that's why we started kind of thinking about that.
Included in partnerships and ways to help mitigate some of these liabilities are limited partnerships and limited liability partnerships, or LPLs. A lot of times these are set up for investment transactions. They're short-term. Somebody wants to buy into a building, so you have a general manager who's sort of running the whole deal, but he needs people to invest their money, and they become limited liability partners in that they're not responsible for the day-to-day transactions or actions of the general manager. They're just sort of the man behind the curtain providing the funding. These are complicated to set up. It requires a partnership agreement. And even if you're just doing a general partnership where you and your buddy decide, hey, we're going to go out and sell kites, and we'll just do this as a general partnership, you should probably set up some sort of agreement beforehand as to what happens if partner A wants to leave and partner B still wants to sell kites. What happens if partner A passes away? I was just reading an article about a situation where the family was fighting with the partner because they felt they had ownership through the estate and the partner felt that they didn't. So thinking ahead and thinking out all of these things, that continuity and transferability, because on a sole proprietorship, it's all you. There's no transferability. If you stop, the business is done. On a partnership, it could continue with the other partner, but what is that going to look like? And deciding it beforehand instead of when you're in the midst of it and maybe you dislike each other all of a sudden is probably a lot better to do. So advantages of a general limited partnership. Again, the general partner runs the business. The limited partners just provide the funding. There's pass-through taxation, which is included to those limited partners. If there's income, they're going to be paying on that as well on their personal tax return. There's a partnership agreement, which again should be set up prior to. And the liability depends on what type of partner you are. If you're the general partner who's out there setting up and running the show, you're going to be much more liable than the person who's just writing the check. So probably one of the most common ones is an LLC. A lot of businesses set up as an LLC. It is relatively easy compared to a corporation. It provides more liability protection than a sole proprietorship or a general partnership. So it's a very popular entity. So greater flexibility than a sole proprietorship and partnership in distributing profits. And limited liability, it's like a corporation, so you have some of those protections that a corporation is going to have. Again, you still file it on your personal tax return, so all the income is passed through to you. What you mentioned about piercing the corporate veil is when you start putting your personal expenses onto the company and you mix and mingle your funds, then you've been considered to pierce that corporate veil, and then you no longer have the protection of the LLC. And so that's why it's important to keep your checking account for your business and a separate checking account for your personal so that those two don't intermingle. And that's with an LLC, a corporation, an S-Corp. Your money is your money and your company's money is the company's money. So you can't go out and buy groceries with the company funds.
Is that the major difference
From what?
from sole proprietorship? Or
Well, on a sole proprietorship, you're accepting that liability personally anyways. You still need to separate your money. I mean, it's still important that you keep those two buckets separate. But as far as getting that limited liability so that it doesn't come back to you personally, you really have to show that the corporation is a separate entity from you personally. Yes?
So is that a best practice or is that a requirement? There's no requirement that they have separate accounts. You've got a set of books that account for the money. Is that correct?
I am not an accountant, but I strongly believe you should have separate bank accounts from your personal. And as far as whether or not it's a legal requirement, it's going to be a lot harder for you to show in an audit trail if you only have one account what was business versus what was personal. So, Misty, is there anything you want to throw into that?
No, covered it.
Okay.
Isn't it kind of like if you have a rental property? If you have a rental, your house could be part of that property. And so it'd be like your checking account, if you think about it as like a house or something, right? Is that if something did happen and someone tried to sue you, they could take away that property. So if you're limited liability and you have a separate account, it can only go after that separate account. They can't go after your own personal, your own checking account, right?
Exactly.
So if you did mix and mingle, then you wouldn't be able to tell the difference, and they could actually go after that entire pot.
Right. If you have one checking account that's paying for everything, now all of a sudden they sue you and you have to pay them your assets or whatever's in that checking account. And you can't say the balance of the company is $5,000 and my personal balance is $25,000. They're going to go after the $30,000 because it's all together. So keeping that separate, very key to keeping your liability.
And then they're gonna go after your house because you pay your mortgage out of that account.
Business.
Also, and
Yeah.
so any equity in that is basically been paid out of that account, so that's part of the
Right.
asset.
So with an LLC, it says here that most of the time people make estimated tax payments, and that's so that they're not surprised at the end of the year, right?
Mhm.
Because this is still, because I didn't realize that an LLC was still pass-through taxation.
It is.
Okay, so that's why you estimate and pay every quarter.
So that you're not hit with a big check at the end.
Yeah. That makes sense. Thank you.
What other questions do you all have about LLCs? Yeah.
So if you already follow those best practices with the sole prop of keeping all of your expenses separate and all that kind of stuff, what you have to do to jump to the LLC, like the number of changes that you would have to make to how you do business seems like it's very small.
You need to fill out, an LLC has articles of organization. You'd want to file those with the state and get a business license as a corporation. They'll approve you. It's pretty easy to find LLC, fill in the
Okay.
papers online.
Okay.
And do
So,
you-
it's pretty easy.
Yeah, yes.
And for New Mexico, do you know the turnaround time from application to?
It's over 90 days.
Yep.
We got mine in a week.
Okay, so anywhere from a week to 90 days.
Yeah.
Really depends on their workload.
Yeah, how far behind they are.
And I know for when we had our C corporation, we transferred it from Florida to New Mexico, and we had to, of course, do all the filing in the state. We ended up driving up to Santa Fe and just showing up in person because stuff got lost on people's desks. We had to refile. So I think there's different state to state and how efficient they are with their business applications and the practices with the community that want to be business entities. So I just was frustrated. So that doesn't surprise me, I guess, the 1 week to 90 days. That it just depends on.
Lucky.
Did you go to the Capitol to do your own footwork?
No, I FedExed it up, but counting from the next day that it arrived in their office, it was probably 4 days
Okay.
when I got, you put money in the account, you create an account, you deposit money in the account,
Yeah.
you link the account to the application,
Yeah.
they processed it, I saw it take the money out, and
Yeah.
2 days later, I had the certificate back in the mail.
Wow.
How much money did you put in the FedEx envelope?
Small and marked bills.
And what time of year did you do that? Because I think that really is important in the state of New Mexico for the workload. It's what time of year you can be filing.
It was recent, so I don't know.
I have a question there.
Yeah.
So, because as a sole proprietor, you have a gross receipts number. Do you have to change that once you transfer to the LLC? Do you have to have a new one?
Good, I was about to bring that up.
Oh, great.
If you are a sole member LLC, I believe you can keep your own personal social security number. If you have multiple partners in your LLC where it's you and somebody else, then you really need to get your own federal tax ID number. Even if you're a sole member LLC, it's not a bad idea to have a separate federal tax ID number because, again, now you have that separation of this really is my company. It has its own federal tax ID number. It's its own thing. And then and it files its own return, which is then reported on your personal. So, again, trying to avoid that whole maintaining liability.
What I'm talking about is the gross receipts, New Mexico.
The CRS number, that doesn't change.
That doesn't change?
I don't think so, but you'd have to talk with them.
So I got a CRS. I first did sole proprietorship, got a CRS, and then they made me close that and create a new CRS for the federal ID.
It gets complicated.
It does.
But once you get it set up, you're good.
Okay.
And actually, applying for a federal tax ID number, you can do it all online now. So that doesn't take long, actually. So.
Are you going to talk a little bit about DBAs as complicating factors? So, order and sequence. And this gentleman was talking about he opened up his bank account, he filed his application with the bank. So, but you want to file your bank account as your DBA name.
Mm-hmm.
So, order and sequence. Today, can I go open up my bank account with my DBA name and then file for my LLC?
No.
Okay.
The banks, yeah. We want to know who we're dealing with. And that's only outlined in the Articles of Organization. And that tells us who the owners are, who's the person who can write the checks, who has authority. And so we need all of that information prior to opening the account. So you need your federal tax ID number when you open a bank account. You need your Articles of Incorporation and a business license. Those three things in order. And we can look and see online too if you're in good standing. But really, those are the items you need to open up a bank account.
As an LLC.
As an LLC.
Correct. Thank
Okay.
you.
Now, let me ask you, if you use your personal credit card to pay for expenses,
Mm-hmm.
is that pierced to pay?
That's getting out, again, I'm not a tax advisor. Mm-hmm. What I have heard is if you have a separate personal credit card that you use only for business expenses and then a personal credit card that you use only for personal expenses, that would be the best route to do that. But to combine all expenses onto one credit card, then again, you have that mismatch of what's being paid for by what.
Okay, separate personal, in other words, as the LLC, or you can have a separate personal credit card?
The best is to have a credit card in the name of the business.
Okay.
That's the best route.
So I think that was the gist of my earlier question. The sequence is important because you get filing fees, you have other things, maybe in my case liability insurance.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't have a checking account yet, I'm paying for these with my private account. So I could just say, okay, screw it, I'll pay taxes on at the end of the year and not worry about it, but I should be able to deduct those against the business. So since I paid for them out of my personal account, there shouldn't be anything that stops me from including those as expenses in the business, and then I've got an account going forward. In the beginning, there is a sequence that trips you up.
You're correct, and keeping track of what those expenses are as you're going along and saying, here's my filing fee, here's what I did to get the business set up.
And then reimburse yourself.
And then reimburse yourself once that account's open.
Which requires revenue.
Which, yes. Or you can put yourself a note payable on your balance sheet saying officer debt of that
So
you owe
loan
yourself
money?
money
Loan money?
from the, yeah.
Okay, create a loan note.
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
all right.
The company owes me X, Y, and Z.
An officer loan?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so,
Your own bank.
what?
You're on your bank. So you are your own bank in that case.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm. So corporation, this is its own legal entity. There is no combination of personal and there's just it's its own thing, its own person. It's created under the laws of the state, which means it also has its own privileges and liabilities distinct from its members. So if you truly want to separate yourself, this is the route to go. There are two types, a C-Corp and an S-Corp. The biggest difference is how the taxation happens for each one. You don't need to incorporate. A lot of businesses don't, but it does have its privileges, including the separation of the liability that we've been talking about, especially if you're in sort of a high liability type of situation. So a C corporation. This is most common when you hear about things like Disney, IBM, very large corporations. That's usually what you're talking about. Advantages and disadvantages. You have limited liability as the owner. The company is taxed separately. There can be a double taxation issue in that you pay your personal taxes and then also you're paying the corporate taxes. So that is one thing to consider. It's hard to form. You should probably get a lawyer to set it up for you. Complex ownership and management. Again, this is something if you're looking at you're going to own it, but someone else is going to manage it, then this provides you liability from what your managers are doing, so that what they do in the corporation is separate from you personally. Also, if you're going to have a lot of people, like IBM who sells shares of stock, they can do that because they're a C corporation. Everybody gets a little piece of ownership. It's appropriate for a few specific reasons. Let me remind myself what those are. It's also, one of them being it's easy transferable. Like I said, with shares, you can sell your shares to somebody else who wants to continue to run the corporation, thinking about this long term. Because the company is perpetual. As long as the door is open and doing business, it can be open for, we've seen corporations open for 100 years. Corporations also have centralized management. So again, you can be the owner and somebody else is running it. It also has a board of directors. So management has to report to the board of directors and the board of directors has to report to the owners. So there's sort of a triangle of who's minding the shop. Everybody has somebody else they have to report to. In a sole proprietorship, you report to yourself, so you don't have to be accountable to anybody but you. So that's one of the big differences too. Does anybody have any questions before I move on? So if you are going to set up a corporation, you're going to need to elect directors, also see if there's going to be dividend distributions. Maybe you can pay yourself via distributions, which is also something S-Corps can do too. So an S-Corp, again, owner has limited liability of a corporate shareholder, but you pay income tax like a sole proprietor or partner. So this is sort of what the IRS came up with to sort of be between, provide the liability, but still be a corporation. So you're paying this on your personal income tax, but you still have a corporation, you still have a board of directors, you still have shareholders, but the taxation is separate. Does anybody have questions?
So in an S corporation, as the business entity in a separate account, you have revenues that you elect to either pay yourself or not. And different than the C corporation where you have shareholders and X amount of dollars associated with each of those shareholders. This is just you. But in the S corporation, can you elect as the business entity not to pay yourself a salary or dividends and keep that in just as a growing pot of money, if you will, that is not reportable on your personal tax?
You still have to report the income that the company gets.
Okay.
Now, I don't know how many times I can repeat I'm not a tax accountant or a tax advisor, so I have to walk a really fine line.
Yeah.
The S corporations, what the IRS allows is you can take a distribution tax-free, because if you're paying the personal income tax on the revenue, you haven't taken that. So your company makes $50,000. You report that on your income tax return personally that you have made $50,000. You can take a distribution from the company to cover that tax payment.
Got it. Okay.
Right?
As opposed to C, where you can just leave it as a growing business revenue, pay your business tax, but not have to take a personal distribution. as
Right.
personal income. Got it. Thank you.
Uh-huh. So, like it says here, the bullet point, forming an S-Corp lets you enjoy the limited liability of a corporate shareholder, but pay income taxes as if you're the sole proprietor or partner. So how do you decide which one's best for your business? Start by establishing a business plan and think about the business. Think about what sort of liabilities could arise. Maybe talk with an insurance broker. They're really good at discussing liability and what could come up. So as you're talking with advisors, as you're setting up your business, what are the potential liabilities and pitfalls? Talking to a lawyer too. What have they seen in each of your particular segments? Because the liability piece is very important. Talking to your accountant to discuss the best taxation for you. How many people are going to be involved? Is it just you, or do you know somewhere down the road you want to bring more people into this company and you're going to be selling ownership as a perk of being part of it? So what does that look like in the future as you see your company growing? Is it always going to be just you, or do you want the flexibility that somewhere in the future it could be you and 5 other people owning this? Like it says, ask an attorney. You can also research through the Small Business Administration and IRS websites. They provide a lot of information about what the taxation, what the liabilities are, and some other key points. Something else to consider as a banker and your type, and I hear this sometimes, you're set up a corporation and you feel when you come to the bank to borrow money that you don't need to be responsible or guarantee your loan because the corporation's separate. But from a banking standpoint, I just want you all to be aware, if you're going to be going in to look for a loan, we're still going to be looking for you to guarantee that money and say, I'm personally, even if the corporation is going to fail, I'm willing to pay this loan. It shows that you have some skin in the game, it's your company, it's your business, and that you're going to stand behind your product, your service, whatever that might be. So even though it's a separate entity and the liability for many things is going to be separate, when it comes to borrowing money, we still look to the owners to be, hey, I'm going to borrow money and I'm willing to back this in the event that the company falls through. So, after having discussed this, have you guys thought or changed your mind about the type of entity you want to set up, or has it reinforced what it is that you came in thinking? Has anybody changed their mind, or has everybody sort of thought I was on the right path to begin with?
No, I think I'm on the right path.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a situation, we're starting a new software development company, but we have external investors. So we wanted to keep it simple and do an LLC. We couldn't. So we had to do a C-Corp, and we chose to do New Mexico over Delaware because we want the New Mexico priority for doing projects with the state and other. Our company will expand beyond state lines, but in that case it made better sense to do New Mexico Corporation, C-Corp.
Mm-hmm. Something else to consider is women-owned or minority-owned businesses, because there are different contracts available for both of those entities if that's something in structuring your business.
Do you have to go to a particular certification to qualify for that?
It depends on what you're doing. If you're trying to become a government contractor, there is a certification process that you have to go through and file the paperwork.
And they've changed that a little bit because, well, even last year, for a women-owned small business, you had to be certified by a particular organization, and it was the only certified small business, minority-owned 8A that had to go through a certification and pay for it, and there was a lot of upheaval. And I have to say, I personally put my 2 cents in, and they've changed that. You can go to the Small Business Administration and the PTAP offices, which look at government contracts, and they will help you through the process. And then for any type of government contracts, you have to be registered on SAM, which is the Central Administration Registration database that all federal contracts use.
I know the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce has been doing a lot of workshops recently about how to become a federal or a state contractor, even with the city, how to become a city contractor. So if that's something that you want to pursue, you can check with them to see when they're doing their next ones.
Yeah, and the PTAP offices are really helpful. Small Business Administration, PTAP, PTAP, very helpful.
Oh. So the organization type impacts how you own and run your business. Match your legal structure to your business needs, i.e. tax, liability, management, continuity, and expense. Most common type is a sole proprietorship. A partnership includes pass-through taxation and personal liability. But a business plan is the best way to determine which one's right for your business. And thinking long-term too, not just where you see your business tomorrow when you get started, but in 5 years, if you want to sell the business, perhaps a sole proprietorship isn't the best option to get started with. So what final questions do you all have?
To play off of her saying Delaware, can someone get licensed in Nevada or Wyoming, or I thought it was Maryland? Is that the same as Delaware?
Licensed or form
Get-
your corporation?
Form your corporation.
I suppose you can do it anywhere as long as you have an attorney who knows the laws there. I mean, Delaware is pretty common for companies that are looking for investment, because that's what investors look for. They want a Delaware C-Corp. I guess they have the least strict laws. It does cost more to become a C-Corp in Delaware, but it's just easier to be a corporation. They have the best laws, is what I've been told by my attorney.
I always heard and read that there was the veil of protection was heavier in those states.
Which is good, right?
Yeah.
You want to be protected.
Yeah. But can you get your LLC through those states and still do business in New Mexico?
I don't know.
Yeah, you have to file a foreign, you have to
Okay.
file as a foreign corporation with the state.
Okay.
What other questions?
If you are operating as a sole prop right now with a DBA name,
Mm-hmm.
do you know if that's easily transferable to an LLC? Can you continue doing business with that?
As long as the name hasn't been taken.
Okay.
If you go online, you can search the New Mexico State Secretary's office to see
Yeah.
what the corporate names are,
Yeah.
and just make sure that your name isn't taken.
Okay.
And even if you're doing it as a sole proprietor, you probably want to do that
Yeah.
anyways, because, I mean,
Yep, just keep that continuity and, yeah.
right.
Okay.
You don't want another, we had our cheesecake factory, and then the other cheesecake factory came in. So, but she had,
One of those,
yeah,
Okay.
the name was already filed with the state.
Is it common or reasonable for a single individual to have multiple types depending upon their customer? And I have a customer that is very specifically wants sole prop.
Wow.
They want to own you basically.
Wow.
And but if I'm doing work for somebody else, I don't want that liability. So is it reasonable to have both? Probably, depending on.
I mean,
it just makes your taxes more complicated.
it's going to make your taxes more complicated, and
The LLC's a pass-through, so it's not that much more complicated.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
would do the LLC to protect you with the other.
For any other work.
mhm.
And would they ever know that you were an LLC or a sole proprietor?
Yeah, because it's registered through all the SAM's database. So
Oh.
I don't want to go down that road too far. so yeah, so.
I mean, anybody can own multiple companies, so
Tell them
Okay.
to pay insurance for being a
Yeah, there we go.
sole proprietor.
Yeah.
Yeah. pass through that cost to them.
Because that means you're working on probably federal contracts, your subcontract
That's
as a sole proprietor.
That's correct.
So
That's
they're,
probably, yeah.
they're trying to put some liability on
That's
you.
Yeah.
Ugh,
Good
oh,
point.
it's scary.
You look at the contract
Yeah.
to mitigate those risks.
Have your lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you need a lawyer for that stuff.
Stop
Wow.
working for them.
I
So-
think in that situation though is where we found benefit in incorporating as a C-Corp, because you're walking into, big firms or, high exposure areas. My husband and I we're going into Mayo Clinic as well as HCA facilities, as well as, smaller community hospitals. If, under the C-Corp, it didn't matter where we went or what we did, our insurance covered us,
Mhm.
as consultants in healthcare. So if we go somewhere, somebody came to us when we were in a hospital and something happened to them, I mean, that was where that big entity really was protective
Mhm.
for us, and that's where I would see a lot of exposure.
Okay.
Because if you want to do that, you want to just make it easy, you want to just be able to go and help people, but, you've got a lot of exposure there, and the only way, I think the only way to get that, if it's more than just yourself, is with a C-Corp.
Okay.
You've got a couple people that are in your business that are doing that.
Even in S-Corp, to provide a little bit of a simplicity,
Yeah.
you still get that protection, but the taxation's a little bit easier.
But there would be no advantage of that for a single individual over like an LLC, right?
Right, an LLC and an S-Corp in some ways are they're the most similar of
Okay.
the two structures.
Okay.
What are the tax benefits of either of those? I mean, the LLC, I guess I'm kind of familiar with the way it kind of works, but if you were going to expand your business, the S Corp would allow you to, there's the transferability issue is probably easier, right?
Yes.
Than an LLC.
Mhm.
But then are there any big tax benefits? I mean, is it easier to file with an S Corp versus an LLC? 'Cause I know an LLC, I mean, it is sort of pass through and it's like my own income tax.
Mhm.
But what are the advantages of doing an S Corp instead?
The advantages are more the separate entity and liability and the transferability than the taxation, because the taxation of an LLC versus an S-Corp are very similar.
I got it.
And on an S-Corp, you can kind of expand a little bit. If you brought in another partner, then they're also liable. Then their share is passed through on their personal income tax return, the same as yours, whatever that share should be. If you guys can go to the back, there's a post-test and also comments to provide feedback to me as to how I'm doing as an instructor. And if you take a moment to go through that, I'd really appreciate it.
Twitter.
I don't think we have. I would just like page 21 back, please. The rest is for you to keep. And I hope you all will come back next month, May 18th, for the time management class.
And that'll be here.
That'll be here.
May 18th.
Same time?
Same bat time. Same live stream channel.
And you'll do that, Heather?
Yes.
As well?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And that's it. If you guys don't have any more questions for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.